IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello, listeners, and hello, Ayushi.
Hi, Tash. What's up?
Not much. I've had a very chill Saturday till now, actually. I woke up very, very late today and I'm very groggy even now. I've eaten a large lunch and I'm drinking coffee now in the hope of surviving.
What did you have for lunch?
I had a fish kassi, I had a ghee roast crab, I had a prawns and neer dosa.
Oh my God. Oh. Well, I had a head massage today. So,
You know, that's a twist. Yes. They are the same sphere of greatness.
today was self-care Saturday.
Wow.
Yes, we are recording on a Saturday, which means that we do work 6 days a week. Just to let all the listeners know what hardworking individuals we are.
I also have to sometimes shoot on Sundays. Do you ever hear me saying or making a big deal about it?
I would like to make a big deal about the fact that today is my Saturday off.
And you're getting to spend 1 hour chatting with your best friends in the universe, the
So
internet.
I don't actually get it off. Anyway,
Wow, what a
Wow.
monstrosity you are.
what a sentence I was open to interpretation. Anyway,
How are you? How's
I'm-
life?
I'm good. It's been a solid week. We have a bunch of episodes that we're going to record in a quick, rapid succession over the next couple of days. So we're going to actually land up talking to each other very close together in the episodes. And that's because little Miss Tang is going on a holiday.
Yeah, I need it. It's time. And if I'm out of network, I figured it's better we get many episodes in so that you listeners don't have to ever struggle. Not that you do. I'm guessing you all are fine only.
Hey, they do struggle
They do.
without us. On that note, we do have a guest on the show today, as you would have seen from the topic, and it
Yeah.
is very exciting. But Tash, I think you should be the one to introduce because you have a little bit of a connection here.
Okay, so leading up to our 100th episode, we want to obviously address many things that are important to us. And since Ayushi and I both are owners of the female body, I thought it would be interesting to speak with a medical professional. And life is funny. It's so interesting how the universe works in mysterious ways. I was just chatting with another friend, and then I would just like to bring Dr. Sakina Radiowala onto this chat right now. And then we can talk about how funny and serendipitous it is that we find ourselves here today. Sakina.
Hi, Dr. Sakina. For the rest of the show, can we call you Sakina though?
Yes.
Oh, definitely, please. The entire name sounded really long and it sounded too professional. I don't know, I'm still not used to it. Just not.
Hey, listen, own it. You are the most qualified person on this call
Yeah.
right now. So,
But as the name of your show suggests, owning up to it, it still takes some time.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
you still feel like a child. Like the other day when Natasha just called me out of the blue, I was just like, oh, okay, I think she's calling for another medical doubt. Okay, might as well just give it another shot. And then I was like, oh, she's calling me for an interview. Someone actually wants to know about me for a change.
Why would I call you for a medical doubt, Sakina? Context, listeners.
Oh, you guys.
so wait
have
1
no
second.
idea.
But let's
I
start
can
with
imagine.
a little bit,
of context around
little
it.
Yeah.
context is that we have been wanting to speak to a gynecologist. We
Okay.
obviously had, you see people on the internet who have become, slightly famous using their profession. And somehow that didn't quite sit well with us. We weren't too sure. And we really wanted a female because we felt a little bit comfortable with a female gynecologist. That was our reasoning. And then when Tash and I got talking, she had a light bulb, like Mentos moment where she was like, and now you say.
So, listeners, Sakina and I went to school together many, many years ago.
Till 6th standard.
Correct. From 3rd to 6th, we were in the same school. And then since 6th standard, we have not spoken to each other. As Mercury retrograde would have it, we are now meeting in the middle of it all. Because shout out to our other batchmate, classmate, and common friend, Simi. she was like, Sakina's a gynecologist. But it wasn't about the podcast also when I had spoken to Simi about gynacs in general. I was in need of a gynac at that point.
Oh.
But
I was not absolutely wrong when I thought
Yeah, I was about to say
a medical
so.
doctor.
that's how you came up in conversation. But then I was like, this is perfect. It's just worked out so well. Because when I called you, you said there'd been a group which had been made for school.
This is all information that now our listeners.
Means
Oh my God,
imagine
did I
reconnecting with someone after 17 years or something.
Yeah,
It's
that's
nuts.
true. That's true.
It's nuts.
It's absolutely nuts.
And in those 17 years, she's become a gynecologist and you've become an actor. And isn't that just testament to show that like
Adulthood.
there is no telling where you're going to land up at all?
Exactly. Like what we thought in school, who's going to turn out to be what, it's just completely turned around. You can't predict how someone's going to end up being when they're younger and how they're going to end up being when they're older, because so much maturity also enters to you at a certain point of time in your life. And you do tend to change as a person over time,
Of
irrespective whether or
course.
not you want to admit it or not.
No,
Yeah.
we are change embracers. We are growth embracers. We actually like to the point where I think on the other extreme, I'm like, if I'm not evolving or growing, I am stagnating. And if I'm stagnating, I'm moving backwards. That's my obsession. I'm like, no, just got to keep getting better. But you're right. It's impossible to predict where life is going to dump you in a couple of years. And look at us now. We're having a chat on a Saturday afternoon and we're going to talk lady parts.
Yeah,
Oh.
boy. Sakina, though,
Well, that's
I want to
absolutely
know.
normal for me.
Yeah, what is the what made you choose gynecology? How did you get into this space? Tell us a bit about
Okay.
your journey.
Yeah.
So honestly, I don't know if Ritasha and you mean school. I was always like a biology person. So we had this really amazing school teacher. I don't know if you remember her, Mishra.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
you do remember.
I do.
Yeah. So basically, she was a biology teacher, and she was the one who got me interested into the entire aspect of medicine itself. So it all started from there. And I honestly did not have anything else in my mind when I reached, when the day comes when you decide, oh, do you want to do science or you want to do
Yeah.
commerce?
Yeah.
And I was like, science, biology.
That
There was
was
nothing
it.
else in my mind. Yeah, there was nothing else in my mind. And I have always been preparing to get into medicine ever since I think I hit 11, 12 standard. Because that's the phase like when you decide, okay, fine, what career you want to choose and stuff like that. Although it shouldn't be that way, because I think 16, 17-year-olds should
It's
not be
too
responsible for
young.
the future.
Yeah.
They really should not. Like, okay, fine, you can say it worked out for some of us, but it doesn't always work out the best for everybody. And it can also be a little disheartening if you've worked for something and you don't end up getting it.
Yeah.
But I was fortunately one of the lucky ones who did end up, getting what I want. So I got into JJ Hospital, Grand Government Medical College, for my MBBS after that. And after that, it's always been like, you've been in the rut studying medicine, etc., etc. So that is when you start realizing what different fields are out there and what you really like. And honestly, having been there and being a female myself, gynecology always was something which really attracted me right from my early days of medicine. So yeah, I always worked towards that. In fact, I actually got ophthalmology as a branch when I first decided to choose my specialty. Yeah, but then when I got it, that is when I realized, okay, fine, this is not something I really wanted. It was just like, okay, fine, peer pressure, because ophthalmology is like a cool people branch and it's like a light branch. So then
I
you're
didn't know
like,
this.
yeah, basically ophthalmology, it has fixed working hours, hardly
Yeah.
any emergencies.
Correct.
So it was like something which people generally go for. Okay. But when I took it, I realized, okay, fine, this is not something I was really happy with. And that's when I realized, what I always wanted to do was to be a gynecologist. And that is what I actually ended up choosing then at the end of it. So yeah,
That's
here I am.
amazing. Hey, I have a question. So I don't know, I preface that really badly, my bad. How long have you been practicing from like finishing your,
MBBS.
like MBBS? But no,
MBBS.
then you had to specialize, right? So
Correct.
since then, how long have you been practicing?
So it's hardly been any time actually, because I am Ritasha's age. So I'm not that
We
old.
are all the same age, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not that old. Don't portray me to be that old. So I finished my residency last year because of COVID. My exams and all were getting postponed and stuff like that. So basically after MBBS, we have 3 years of our post-graduation
Residency, yeah.
course, which is residency basically. So we have 3 years of that, which I did from Bombay Hospital. And after that, I've been completing a year's bond because, as I said, my MBBS was from a government hospital. So you have to serve that bond period to the government once you're done with whatever graduation and everything you have to do. So I have been serving that in JJ itself since the past, I think, around 10 months now. So yeah, so since my graduation, I've been working as a gynecologist, as a senior gynecologist since around 10 to 11 months now.
Amazing. And what's it like? My question is also to work at a government hospital. Like these 10, 11 months must have been quite a eye-opener in terms of just working at JJ. What's that been like?
So basically, we've always had some kind of connection towards government institutes because, as I said, my MBBS was from there. So we knew what sort of patients come. But when you see them firsthand as someone who's like primarily treating them, like along with your residents over there are residents over there also in JJ Hospital. So you are primarily seeing them. You are one of the decision makers in their treatment plan, which is not something which you were doing before. So it's a different ball game completely. And the type of patients you get in JJ and the workload, it's crazy. Like you realize how much Indians love to reproduce. when you start working in a place like this, you're just like, okay, fine, stop. That's it. How many kids do you want to have?
Dude, that is
Yeah. And apart from obstetrics, like this is the part of gynecology that we call obstetrics, which is the delivering babies part.
Right.
Yeah. So apart from that, even gynecology, like the diseases the female body goes through in her entire life, you get to see a lot of crazy cases in that aspect also, like what you generally don't get to see in normal public, because the rarest of the rarest things end up coming in JJ. So you're just like, oh, we got to see this cool thing today. So it's like that. So sometimes you have a tumor which is the size of a baby. So
inside the uterus.
Yeah, inside the uterus, inside the ovaries. So these are all these really cool cases that you get to come across when you're working in an institute like this, which you don't generally get to see otherwise.
Yeah.
So the type of
because the range and the demographic and just the size of the general public population that comes to a government hospital is also the variety is just a mixed bag, right?
Exactly.
In terms of
And it's like people knowing the name of JJ, they come from all over the country. It's not just, okay, fine, it's confined to our city limits or the state or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a famous hospital. So we have people coming in from the north, UP, Bihar, from Rajasthan, from Madhya Pradesh, people coming from all over. Once they realize, okay, fine, this hospital over here is not happening. Finally, okay, fine. It's just like, let's go to a government hospital in Bombay.
What's the deal though with the infrastructure at a government hospital? Do you feel well supported as a medical professional there?
Not at all.
Absolutely,
Yeah, the thing is that because of the sheer pressure of the number of patients, it's physically impossible to maintain that level of hygiene, that level of cleanliness, that level of, I would not just say hygiene and cleanliness. That is still okay, fine. Like if you become stricter with that, you can still maintain it. Just the infrastructure in general, it's obviously not going to be as up to date as it is going to be in a private.
Yeah.
Okay, because the funding which is there for any government institute from the government itself is not as much. And the number of patients who also come in, half the funds go in getting their medicines, getting their basic drugs, getting operation theatre equipment. So basically, your entire funds goes in that. So infrastructure ke liye bahut kam bachta hai. It's not like, they can afford a lot of things to do for the infrastructure. So that way, if you are saying that I would recommend it to my family or something to come there and do something, then maybe I would be like a little hesitant telling them to go to government, because if you can afford, then why would you not choose like the best for yourself? But when it comes to treatment, you get the best of doctors over there who actually treat the patients with limited resources, which is kind of very commendable.
Oh, dude, that in itself is like truly commendable. Because the amount, I recently went to a government hospital for the first time in my life. And I was shocked, saddened, overwhelmed. But just by the visuals, the kind of energy, the vibe, and something as basic, which I didn't realize, is that the patient's blood sample also, it's not like they are going to send it to the path lab. You as the relative or you as the friend of the patient, you have to take it and go and submit it to a metropolis or wherever. And we take these things so for granted, just the basic privilege of healthcare, which, okay, theek hai, South Bombay, privileged families, we have access to it all. But do you feel like this whole experience has changed you as a person and emotionally kind of matured you or made you more resilient to human suffering? What I want to understand that side of your job also.
Okay, so now one thing that you have to know is that, yeah, this what you said is absolutely true. It's not just for blood samples. Like we say that, okay, fine, government hospital here, everything's free. But since the supplies are so limited and they're so low, ultimately we have to tell the patients, you need to have some stock of money on you, because if we are sending you out, you need to get your medicines yourself. There was a point at JJ where we didn't have gloves. So something as basic as gloves, which you need multiply, even as if you're doing obstetrics, there's one thing you have to understand. We have to keep doing vaginal examinations for patients.
Yeah.
So you cannot do that without gloves. Something is basic, and you need sterile gloves. It's not just, you cannot just pick up any glove off the side of the room and say, okay, fine, I'm going to use this and I'm going to do an examination. No, you cannot do that, because you're inserting a part of your body inside someone else's. So you have to maintain that kind of sterility around you. But that is obviously not maintained because of the environment. Plus, telling a patient who can barely afford one meal a day, you're telling him to get thousands of rupees worth of medicines, drugs. These gloves cost a lot. Okay, your basic set of drugs will cost you at least 100 rupees. So if you're telling them, okay, fine, get a pack of 10. So it's already 1,000 over there gone for him. That really makes me feel bad sometimes. So you try to mobilize it as much as possible from social workers, from, sometimes the residents themselves, they put in some money and they chip in if the patient really cannot afford. So it's just like that. Like you make your way through, you try to do the best you can. But then ultimately, yeah, after a point, you do become a little resilient to their suffering, because it's like ultimately you're seeing so much every day. And then it's not always that all patients will understand that you're not doing this on purpose. So they tend to get aggressive.
Yeah.
So that is the part where actually, it gets a little scary for us. So you have to be a little strong and you have to shut yourself out to their suffering. Because if you are not strong, they will climb all over you. So that is the problem. And certain patients are really downtrodden. They're like, hum majboor hai, we cannot do anything. So they will sit and cry. So you feel bad for them. But then some people, they're like, they treat you like, okay, you are a government servant. You're supposed to help us out. So it's not always in our hand. It's not like we provide the supplies. But since we are the first face that is there in front of them, they are obviously going to remove it all out on you.
Yeah.
So that is when the problem arises, the aggression, the people's frustration. So you have to shut yourself out, at least for a while. There are certain people who are amazing. There are certain people who are very cooperative, but that proportion of the population, it's not large.
Much less, of course.
And when something like that happens to their patients, you feel even more that you want to work for them even more. But that sort of compassion to get from the patient side, from the relatives, it's not always there. So, yeah, so it's always like, as you said, you do try to shut yourself out from all these things, because the more you get involved, the worse it gets for your mental health too. So.
And did you learn this? It's more like trial and error, that you were told, like by, say, people that came before you, seniors, just like, you know what, you're going to have to suck it up and you're just going to have to get a little tougher? Or is that something that you just unfortunately had to learn by yourself?
Actually, you have to learn this along the way, because my residency was in a very protected environment. I was a resident in Bombay Hospital, which is a private institute, right? So it's kind of like we had a general ward over there. So general ward used to be like our ward, the residence ward. So that is like where we learn to manage patients. We learn to operate on patients. That is what we tend to do. But since it's ultimately a kind of private hospital, you cannot talk to a patient in a particular way. The patient cannot talk to you in a particular way. So there is some kind of decorum that is maintained. And the class of people you also get over there is also a little different to the class of people you get in a government institute. So there I learned what decorum is, how to talk to a patient, how to converse with a patient, how to calm a patient down, because it did not have as much of a load as a government hospital has. So yeah, that is where I learned it. But then as in when you start moving on in the world, when you start seeing different types of patients, you realize, okay, fine, compassion doesn't always get you everywhere. You have to be strict, you have to be firm, and you have to put your foot down sometimes.
Yes.
So that is when you learn how to deal with patients. The softer you are, the more you're walked on upon. So you learn it along the way. Nobody tells you that, okay, fine, you have to talk to a patient this way, you have to treat a patient this way. It is something that you learn. Okay, fine, if someone's getting aggressive with you, you're not going to sit there and just be like, oh, okay, fine, it's okay. You're going to obviously take a stand for yourself. Maybe once, maybe twice, you might ignore it. But the third time, obviously, you're going to stand up for yourself. So that is when you learn all these things.
That's And to think that not only is it a pressure set environment, you're doing your actual activity is also a very high stress activity that you're actually doing.
Exactly.
And somebody's yelling at you, but you're also like, excuse me.
You got your
there's like-
hands in somebody's vagina. What's going on? There's so
That's
much.
not the toughest part. That's not
I'm
the
sure
toughest
that's-
part. Yeah.
What is the toughest part about the
your job.
physical
right now.
job of it? Yeah.
It is physical. It is a very physical job. Obstetrics is not something which you can be like, okay, I can tell somebody from the
Yeah.
room, okay, fine, you give this
Yeah.
medicine to somebody, she'll be fine. It's not something you can consult over the phone. I have to be there.
Yeah.
It's not like a baby will deliver without you being there. And for most of it, yes, it goes smoothly. But then sometimes when it is not, it involves a lot of physical effort. Like as you've seen in the movies when you scream at the patient, like push, push. So it's not exactly that gentle. It's actually pretty rough because
Yeah.
the woman will not listen to you. She gets aggressive sometimes because she's in pain. You can't help it. So you have to like hold her down, pin her down. You have to make sure she does not do anything which will harm the baby. So there's a lot of physical factors also that are involved in the entire process of giving birth. So it gets physically taxing.
Okay, which was do you
How many
remember your
times-
first delivery? Like,
yeah, I was going to say how many.
Obviously, I remember my first
girl,
delivery.
we gotta chat about that.
Oh my goodness. But it was still supervised. It was very, very supervised the first time you do it. So
But say now, tell us now, give some juicy details.
can I?
Patient
I mean-
Anonymous, you tell us. Yeah. Your
No,
experience.
because it's not exactly PG-13. So
That's okay. Our
That's okay.
podcast is not
That's okay.
PG-13 either.
so it was actually pretty uneventful. My first one was fine. It was basically a very simple, straightforward kind of a delivery. Patient came, she was dilated. You have to observe the patient, you have to monitor her. You have to make sure she's not getting dehydrated. That's like the first and foremost thing in labor. You have to make sure she's not getting dehydrated. Because if she gets dehydrated, she'll piss you off in the second stage. And she will not push. She'll just be like, no, forget it. I'm not going to do anything. So
She has no
then she just
energy.
No, they have no energy then if you don't keep them hydrated. This is what I learned in my first degree because I had not hydrated her well. So she got a little dehydrated towards the end. She got exhausted. She didn't push. And there is something called a fundal, like a fundal pressure. Like if you've seen in 3 Idiots when Kareena Kapoor is telling you
Oh, they
push
had to
the baby.
suction the baby.
Yeah.
No, that's a
No, no.
suction.
To
No,
push
I'm not
it.
talking about suction.
Slowly
That doesn't
push it
always
out.
happen.
Okay.
It's not slow.
Oh, it's not.
So not slow.
Guys,
It's
the
like
movies are
literally
lying.
you climb onto the patient and you like give a lot of pressure because the baby does not come out otherwise. You have to like push it. That itself, it's a lot of physically taxing. You're literally pushing the baby out from top because she's not pushing from down. So it's, yeah. So basically it's like one person is climbing on top of her and she's like pushing the baby out. Other person is like, okay, fine, giving an episiotomy from down. Episiotomy is basically a cut that you give
Yeah.
on the perineum.
Okay.
Okay, so you have to give that so she doesn't tear anywhere else, which is not required.
Right.
And there's like everyone's just screaming, like push, 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 push. And it's not a pleasant sight.
Dude.
Because as you know, like along with the baby, there's a lot of other stuff also that comes out.
Yes.
It's not just the baby because it's a lot of other things. And that all tends to like fly on you. It's like not
So
always
shit has flown on you. Placenta has
Everything
flown
has-
on you.
everything's flown on me.
I love it.
Everything has flown on me.
I love
So
it.
there used to be a time in my first year of residency where we used to be like always covered in amniotic fluid, in baby's urine, in baby's poop, in mother's poop, in mother's urine. There's not this, you name it, the thing has been on me. And we've been so exhausted, we've gone for lunch in that. We're like, "F- it. I am going to eat my food. I don't care about whatever's on my clothes. I'm just going to wash my hands, sit on the table, eat my food, and then run again for work. It used to be that bad. So at least at this point of time in my life, no, I'm not in that completely.
My
But yes.
entire uterus has just folded up on itself and just crawled back up.
Curled into a tiny ball.
It's just like so scared right now.
Dude.
Yeah, so there's a lot of gross things about a delivery. It's
Do you-
not clean.
Do you still, though, at some point when, and again, I'm definitely extrapolating from media and, telltales and what you hear, but it's like, is there some level of joy, though, that's still in you when
Yes.
when the baby comes out and you get to look at it and you get to give it to the mom?
100%.
Is that
That's
like
my favorite moment.
That's your favorite
That is
part.
still my favorite moment. There's not a baby in the ward I haven't squeezed.
Aw.
Yeah, as soon as they're clean, I just take them from the staff and I'm just like, oh, such a cuddly thing.
Oh my
And most of
God.
them are cute. Yeah, they're very cute. Like all the babies that are born, they all are so clueless. I'm like, you have no idea what you've come into.
Oh, you have
Just
no
wait.
idea.
You have no idea.
And you know what? I think
Yeah,
what's also so interesting is you have no idea what it took to get you here either. Like, I think there's two sides of that. Like, we always look at a baby and you're like, oh my God, you don't know what you're in for. But you're like, you're actually, though, a product of something so much bigger than yourself as well, and so much work and effort and assuming it was in a wholesome way. I do.
It is. It's always nice when, you have a patient who's very cooperative, who's very like thankful once you're done, and who tells, if it is because of your efforts that, I ended up having a safe delivery. So that actually really makes you feel really good at the end of it.
Do
you mind if we ask you a little bit more like tougher questions, just to understand how someone like you, how do you deal with loss, like in terms of, say, patient loss or child loss, or like that kind of stuff? I'm saying because, at this age, and we've talked about this before, Tashna, and some of the other episodes, it's like we are slowly coming to terms with the idea of mortality and loss, and understanding and accepting it as okay, this is going to start happening now. But we were thinking about more in terms of, say, losing maybe older family members, elderly people, and like just getting better at dealing with grief. But I'm saying you work in a job where sometimes, unfortunately, the collateral damage is grief, like it's just a loss of life. So how do you deal with that? How do you come back to that every day and not, take it on yourself?
As I said, you have to develop some kind of a thicker skin than that. Although it's not always that it doesn't affect you. It does. Like when you see a young mother, you have to tell her, your baby is no more inside and to deliver the baby now. So breaking that kind of news, it's never easy. It's always, always difficult because you don't know how the person is going to react. Now, there are certain people, it's very sad to say, that the Indian population themselves sometimes are so shut off to their own pain.
Yeah.
They themselves sometimes are completely, okay, fine, it doesn't matter, just deliver the baby and give it to us. And some families are so emotionally invested, that's obvious, like 9 months you've carried your baby. It is sometimes devastating for them. So you have two sets of people, two sets of population like that. One which gets absolutely devastated, and one, to them, their suffering is like, okay, fine, it is a part and parcel of our life. So when you see things like this on a regular basis, which it is quite regular. So when you see stuff like this, you're just like, okay, so we also have to learn a way to deal with this. We need to get a coping mechanism for this. It's not always easy, but breaking bad news is actually a part of our studies. Yeah. It's a part of our studies. It's a part of our curriculum. We have to learn how to do it because it's not always the patient will accept it 100%. And their reactions are very varied. Some people will be angry. Some people will be devastated. Some people will be just like, as I said, accepting to their fate. Yeah. So you have all sorts of people. You get all sorts of family members also. So it's very sad in India, actually, when you see, sometimes the family members, specifically the in-laws, they're like, theek hai, it doesn't matter to us. It's just like, okay, fine. Whatever the lady's suffering, she's suffering, but it doesn't matter to them.
There's a
family support is not there.
There's a larger conversation about just the value of
gender
life in our
and
country.
Patriarchy,
but also just the value of life. Like we have such little qadar for life because of how many people you see that you are switched off from it. You're like
very less.
It's heartbreaking and it's devastating because our entire culture has become like that, I feel.
Our Indian culture is specifically like that. It's very immune to death. It's very immune to pain. There's so many people who, even after you break bad news, they are completely unfazed by it. But then there's some people also who are there who need a lot of counseling, who need a lot of support. There are people like that. And that is when, our role comes in. But for someone who's absolutely unfazed, even we're just like, okay, what counseling can we give such a person?
Yeah.
So you get these type of patients too. But yes, like telling someone that their loved one is no more, it is always sad.
Yeah.
No, of course I can't. I mean, I think anytime you think about the medical profession and of course it's so cool. There's so much admiration for it. But this thing of constantly having to have to tell people that their loved ones are no more, their efforts. Like, I mean, just the idea of telling someone that somebody is no more. That is such a Like, I can't imagine what it does to your mental health as a person. I mean, as you can
Exactly.
be strong, you can, of course. I don't doubt that medical professionals aren't strong. They have to be. But eventually that plays a toll on your like mental state, doesn't it?
It does. It does. To a certain extent, yes. But it's life. It's our profession. We've learned how to deal with it. Life moves on. That's all I can say.
Adulthood. Okay, on that note, maybe
Yeah.
we should slip into a break and
But come back because we are
There's
going to do
lots.
some real fun stuff now.
there's lots.
Okay.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus is joined by writer-director Faraz Arif Ansari to talk about their critically acclaimed short films, Sisak, Siberia, and the recent hit Shir Korma. On The Habit Coach, Ashton introduces us to Avinash BR, co-founder of Deep Rooted Company, and his take on the quality of the food and supply chain in India and current trends in the farming sector. On Naan Curry, Sadaf and Archit talk about the humble potato, right from its origin and trade history to the various ways it can be used in dishes and its health benefits. On All Things Policy, Aditya Ramanathan joins Aditya Parekh to discuss the UK's first ever national space strategy document and the lessons it may hold for India. And on Say No to Drama, Chetna slices through the drama of bad boss behavior and shares what it takes to be a good boss. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our others for that matter, please do tell a friend. We really appreciate you spreading this. Word of mouth helps a lot. And finally, this week, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, and Intel. We really appreciate the support.
Welcome back, listeners. It's me, Ritasha.
And you are in conversation with Dr. Sakina and Ayushi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we're going to do... So Tash put on her Instagram story today, had like crowdsourced a question, just like, what would you like to ask a gynecologist? We thought that we would... I actually love people, is what I've realized. Is because people are insane. The questions that have come are just insane.
I cannot. Some of them are great. Some of them are like, what?
What?
Some of them are like, did you even get the brief?
Oh, wait a sec. Do you remember the school sessions we used to have on periods?
We should, yeah. Oh my God, those were
Oh my God, those were traumatic.
terrible.
And you learned nothing. You still
Yeah.
had
You
to
learned
figure
really
it out.
nothing. Matlab, for the longest time, I thought sanitary napkins were for blue blood.
Hello, this is it. No, I thought blood would be blue.
I still don't understand why we weren't allowed to show blood as blood. Like, what's wrong
Guys,
with
now
blood?
it is blood. By the way, the new commercials have red liquid.
Oh,
Have-
there was one ad with Radhika Apte, which I remember she was literally showing blood dripping.
Amazing.
Good
Why
for
not?
her.
Because if we had normalized that, then, we as young girls who got our period, we wouldn't be disgusted by our own blood.
Exactly.
But I don't think I've ever been like, that's one thing I've never
You are
been
one
disgusted
person,
by.
Ayushi, maybe, but like 9 out of 10 girls find their own period dirty and disgusting, sadly. And this is amongst our own circles also.
Yeah. Okay, but we did get a lot of interesting questions. Now, look,
Yes.
there's two angles to this. One, it's very humorous. We laugh because you're coming from a point of privilege, education, awareness, and you've grown up in somewhat liberal bubbles. Okay, so
Yes.
you these conversations to us.
Were easier.
Yeah, they're easier at least. And then on the other hand, you kind of almost feel so bad because you're like, oh my God, there's just so many young boys and girls, and I mean, everyone really, who don't understand their bodies and are obviously struggling. Like, they are struggling. You imagine teenagers, you're hormonal, you don't understand head or tails of what's going on. So yeah, and they've put it on Ritasha's Instagram question.
Oh,
So,
let's see what hormonal teenagers have to say.
all right. Now we're going to ask, we'll do two questions. Like, we'll do a slightly heavy came on, but answer them in whatever detail you wish to.
Okay.
So what's the ideal age to first visit a gynecologist?
There's no ideal age as such. It all depends upon. Okay. So if you're not having any issues and you're fine, I think around by the age of 2021, you can go in for a regular checkup. At least by 25, you should have your first visit.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of younger girls who have problems with their menstruation, problems with their cycles. They're fairly irregular. Some people, as you know, like the hormonal imbalance PCOD, it's like,
That's the next
Very
question
common.
is, how do you
Yeah,
know
it's-
if you're dealing with PCOD? Because that's like a huge thing that a lot of
So-
people have asked about that.
exactly. So when you're entering your phase of menstruation, your menarche, so that is when your periods are going to be irregular. That is when your hormones are going to be way off, and you're not going to have like a very good cycle the way it's set into your adulthood. And a lot of people are misdiagnosed with PCOD at that point. At the same time, with all the junk food, preservatives, all the extra
Lifestyle,
added, all your lifestyle issues, your lack of exercise and everything, which has become very predominant in today's kids.
Yeah.
So because of all that, their hormonal imbalance even flares off more.
Yeah.
So basically, it does not give the chance for the body to regulate its own cycle. It messes it up. It's like a toxic stimuli which keeps going, no, stay irregular. And that is how PCOD tends to evolve. So initially, because your lifestyle was not good, your diet was not good, they're kids, okay? You can't expect a kid not to eat pizza, pasta, cakes. They're going to be attracted to things like that. So it's a lot of lifestyle as well as dietary issues, which then tend to proceed and lead to these things in adolescence and early adulthood. So, So it is not just, okay, fine, for a regular checkup, you're going to a gynecologist at so-and-so age. There are a lot of other hormonal as well as menstrual issues that women do face even at early adolescent periods. So whenever you feel like, okay, fine, something is wrong, listen to your own body and visit your doctor. So that's it.
All right.
I went to the gynac first time when I became sexually active finally.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, something is up.
But yeah, that is actually a correct thing to do, because when you're sexually active, there's one thing which is very, very important for you to do is a pap smear.
Hello, I've never done.
You have to get it done because it's a cervical screening method. Because it all depends upon how your hygiene, your vaginal health and everything. And that is something you cannot control. So if you're sexually active and you are unsure about what is going on down there, at least every 3 years, one visit to a gynecologist will not hurt you to see if everything is good down there.
This is a personal question, but does a pap smear hurt?
No.
Sure, now you've done it.
It's uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
You've also done it. Guys, what am I doing?
That's because,
my personal problem.
No, I also think like there's a lot in India, it might be different, but this was just in general when I had gone for a bunch of other tests when I was studying abroad, and they are just way more cautious for Western countries where they are very, very like, no, you need to get the entire range of things done. You should do this, you should do that. So
yes,
that was one of those things where I was talked into it and it was fine. So it was okay. But it was never like she's saying, I don't think I ever touchwood had a need to go to a gynac until well into my 20s because I was getting a lot of pain around my period. And so then it was like, okay, you should get an ultrasound done just to see if everything's okay. It turned out it was just like a lot of gas. And that's my side effect. Says I just have a lot of gas during my period.
No, the thing is, when you're symptomatic and you visit any doctor, be it a dentist, be it a gynecologist, be it anyone, like even if you're visiting an MD, if you're symptomatic, there's something wrong with you. So the basic thing, if anyone would advise you to do, is just go in for a regular check. Just see whether you're okay. I'm not saying go every 6 months or every 3 months, but at least once in 3 years is not something very unreasonable.
It's totally possible.
Yeah. It's not even a yearly thing, like unless you're symptomatic. Now, once you're symptomatic, that is when you have to start some kind of treatment. Now, gynecological health, it's very occult sometimes. Like as you're saying, like once she started feeling menstrual pain, and that is why she went to the doctor. That's a good thing because she got it checked and she got it evaluated and she realized, okay, fine, it's not related to my periods, I'm fine. But then people, what they tend to do is, okay, fine, they realize I'm getting pain in my periods, which was not there before. Fine, maybe something, I'll ignore it. Let's see next cycle. And that goes on for like a couple of years. And by that time, whatever problem is there, it's already exacerbated. And then treating that problem becomes even more difficult. The same thing goes for, as I said, I spoke about the pap smear. So you will never know what kind of infection is playing down there till you do not start pouring out something from there, like whatever discharge or whatever you're getting. But when that comes in, it's an established infection and you don't know how far up it's gone. So that's the thing.
Oh, that's true.
It's true.
It's not only one way out. It's
it just
what goes up must come down.
So that's the problem. So that leads to a lot of other problems like endometritis, which is infection of the endometrium, which will again cause infertility problems in the future. That endometritis can go and spread into the fallopian tubes, which will cause salpingitis, which will again cause another other problems. The tubes are again connected to the abdomen inside. So it all pour out from the tubes and go inside the abdomen. And then you will be developing it into something called as pelvic inflammatory disease. And you won't even realize that your small little discharge, which you should have gotten checked 6 months ago,
Is
left
now
your
a
foot
pelvic
infection.
inflammatory disease. Yeah.
Exactly.
What the hell? The human body is nuts.
Exactly. So
Nuts.
never ignore. If you're feeling something is off, just go get it checked out. It doesn't really, it's not going to harm you. But what people think is like, who's going to spend like $3,000 on a consultation on a doctor? Who's going to spend $2,000 on a pap smear? That's what people think. That's how people generally think.
Yeah.
But that is like, abroad, it's covered by insurance.
Yeah.
Here, people have to pay out of their pockets. So not everyone, it's not just about awareness. It's just about, in general, our medical infrastructure and our medical system is really messed up. It's not really patient friendly. Like patients tend to avoid going to hospitals because it's going to cost them a lot, which is true. It does.
And mental peace of mind also, it's going to cost them. Alag.
So in actually line with this question is, can you give us the basic symptoms of a vaginal infection? I think it's a good thing, just in case people are listening. Just in case, what's a sign of like, this is okay for a couple of days, this is not okay?
I've had some mild itching for 2 days now. I'm really stressed. I don't know if it's the heat or it's my vaginal health.
No, see, so if you are getting a symptom like this, suppose you're saying, okay, fine, I am feeling an itch down, I'm getting some kind of discharge, which is not smelling right. It's a little different than what I was normally getting, because you have two types of discharge. You have a hormonal discharge, which is your regular period discharge, which you must be getting every month. So you know, okay, fine, this is what I get every month. But then you feel like, okay, fine, no, this is something different. I'm feeling a little itchy. I'm feeling a little sore. Or maybe during intercourse, you're feeling a little pain, or you're feeling a little dry, or you're feeling a little discomfort, which was not there before. So then you know that there's something which is pulling up. If you get an examination done, if you get it checked down there and your gynecologist does not see anything, or if the smear, whatever the gynecologist has taken is absolutely fine, you know that, okay, fine, you were fine and it was just probably in your head. Then you don't have to get checked for the next 2 or 3 years. Unless your symptoms come up again. Then it's a different thing. Unless the symptoms come up again. It's not, okay, fine, I'm absolutely fine now. There's nothing wrong with me. Oh, I'm getting another discharge. Oh, it's okay, I should ignore it. It's fine. I already got checked like 6 months back. It doesn't work that way. So there are people who are a little over paranoid about their health, who will, keep saying, okay, fine, it's like coming, but you don't see anything. But then they just want to get it checked just for peace of mind. And some people are just like, forget it, it'll go away on its own. We'll just ignore it. So either of the ways, it's wrong. You have to listen to your body. That's it. You have to listen. You have to see whether something is normal for you or not normal for you.
I love that you've said you have to listen to your body, because Ayushi and I discussed that in our last one of the recent episodes.
Yeah, you yourself will know what is wrong with you. Nobody else can tell you what is wrong with you, not even a doctor.
And really, sometimes I don't know whether this sounds sexist or not, but there's something to be said about a woman's intuition. Like sometimes you just know that this is not normal. I know what is my normal situation. This is a flare up. This is, I need to see somebody for this. This is not okay. But okay. So now we'll get into one question which came up, was how to get less weight put on during pregnancy.
But why do you want less weight to be put on during pregnancy?
This person has asked you a question. Please answer.
Okay. So normal pregnancy weight gain, at least in India, should be around 10 to 11 kgs.
Wow.
You should gain that much throughout your pregnancy. If you're gaining anything less than that, I'm sorry, you're going to have an unhealthy baby. But anything more than that, also, you have to get yourself checked. Because
I have to gain 10 kilos.
Yeah. But then you really can't help it, because you can't diet during pregnancy.
Yeah, man. You're eating for 2.
Ayushi, this 10 kgs the 10 kgs that you're putting on, out of that 4 kgs is baby
will come
and placenta.
out of you. Exactly.
4 kgs is baby and placenta, and 2 kgs is your uterus. So 6 kgs you're going to lose then and there.
My God, my uterus is so big. 2 kilos.
Yeah, but I don't, like, if you're gaining excessive amount of weight also, sometimes in pregnancy, it is not fat, it is water. So that is the certain conditions,
right?
Certain conditions which lead to excessive water retention, which we call edema. Okay, which your entire body swells up. Yeah. So that also is not a good sign in pregnancy. And
never.
Yeah. We all saw Kim Kardashian's feet.
Oh yeah,
that is fine. that little amount of edema is fine. But if you're like swelling up, that is also not a good sign. So as I said, a healthy weight gain should be around 10 to 11 kgs. Up to 13 kgs for Indian body standards, it's fine.
All right, next question. Can one get pregnant from unprotected intercourse during your period?
Yes.
Everyone should know.
Yes.
Everyone should know this.
You can
Yes.
get pregnant at any point of time because what you probably think is your period sometimes may not just be your period. There are people who have irregular menstruation who just menstruate at any point of time. You don't know what is their cycle like. Some people have a shorter cycle, some people have a longer cycle. And I don't know, if you're having period on your first day, then probably the chances are very low. But then personally, I find that a little gross.
So can you
Period
just
sex,
tell?
no shame.
Can you
Yeah.
just tell the young girls out
Personally,
there,
judgment.
that the
Yeah.
main thing is to use protection.
That is
Use
key.
protection.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting pregnant.
yes,
It's about-
diseases.
It's yes, because when you're on your period, this is another point. When you're on your period and you're having sex, you're causing some kind of trauma, some kind of abrasions, which at that point your vagina is not willing to heal because there is something going on in your system which it's trying to expel. Ultimately, whether or not people want to admit it or not, it is the endometrial lining, which is
That's-
kind of a waste, which is shedding
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be all clean. Like it's not going to be like the blood which is coming out of your system. Like if you get a
No,
cut,
of course
it is not the
not.
same blood.
Yeah.
No,
It
period blood is different.
It is byproducts of something which has to come out. It has to shed out, and it is kind of like a waste product. Okay, so it's not going to be like really clean. So you have to maintain some amount of healthiness down there.
Hmm.
And during your periods, having sex, it's fine. It's not something which is harmful or anything, but you have to be a little more careful, a little more cleaner, and use protection
Hmm.
so that you don't transmit yourself an infection, which on normal days you would not have.
To worry
Develop.
about that much, maybe. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, correct. So it's not harmful, but at the same time, it's something which you would want to, use protection. So
Always use protection. That
Yeah.
is the bottom line.
and obviously, getting pregnant during your periods chances are very low.
But
Okay,
it
I'm not saying it's
happens.
impossible.
But it's not unheard of.
It's not unheard of. It's not unheard of. It does happen because sometimes people do not have control over the ovulation. And also, one other tip: the sperm stays alive inside your vagina for 72 hours post intercourse.
That's why you can take the
Yeah,
that
72
one.
hours.
Yeah.
So it stays. It has a lifespan
Oh.
of 72 hours, and your egg has a lifespan of 24 to 48 hours. So even if you ovulate like 2-3 days later, the sperm can still fertilize your egg.
What?
So yeah,
It's just lingering in there.
it's lingering in there.
Yeah, fuck.
Exactly.
Okay, what is there
Exactly.
any short way of like, say, suppose this is to kill the sperm inside?
There are spermicides
You can't
which
wash
are
it
used with
out.
condoms. There are spermicides that you can use
Oh.
with a condom. But then again, that
Hmm.
causes a lot of vaginal irritation and everything because it's ultimately
So
you're putting
still
a
it's on.
chemical in.
So still it's on us only.
Still, it's on us.
Okay.
The problem with having a male contraceptive
Oh,
is like the
no.
only thing is a condom.
no.
The only problem is because their hormones are not regulated. Like we have a cyclical increase and decrease in hormones.
Yeah.
So it's easier for us to stop our hormones at a point. You cannot completely cut off a male from testosterone. That's like practically impossible. But since we have a cycle, we can have a pill or something that can cut it off at a point so we don't ovulate. That's what the pill does basically.
Right.
So it's easier to regulate a female cycle as compared to a male cycle, although this is also a little sexist. But
You know,
It's-
the whole biology of it is thoda sexist. Like,
God made it sexist.
are yaar, wahi to, like, for example, two parties are responsible. Two parties have enjoyed. One party has got pregnant. One party has to get abortion.
This is
One-
when you start getting jealous of the seahorse.
Where the male carries
Seriously,
the baby, no, really.
Just want to be a seahorse.
Yeah, but that's why always use protection.
Yeah, thanks,
So,
doctor.
Okay, in the question of using protection now, coming on to say birth control.
Hmm.
Now,
Okay.
birth control in terms of medicating, that was not a very big thing in India for a long time. Now, honestly, with the advent of like Western medicine really infiltrating, and now a lot of gynacs that you go to recommend that. And now I think birth control is now a 3-pronged kind of approach. Like people give it for PCOS, they give it for actual birth control, they give it for skin problems to regulate your hormones.
Correct.
So we have started pumping, like say for example, I refuse to take it because I'm like, I do not want to really mess with my internal chemistry, but touch wood,
Correct.
maybe I've not had a reason to do it so far. So it's easier said than done. However, for a lot of people, they feel that without birth control, they are not able to regulate their periods, they're not able to regulate their skin. So is it is it as bad as we think it is? Is it something that's not that bad? It just depends your dosage. Like this myth that we have around birth control, or like not the myth, maybe like, can you demystify birth control
Birth
for
control.
us? Yeah.
Okay, so what birth control we use in this day and age is of a very low dose estrogen with a kind of a synthetic progesterone combined into a pill, and that is what you use. It all depends upon whether it suits you or it doesn't suit you. For some people, birth control is a boon. It has helped them through premenstrual pain, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is your PMS. Okay, some people have very, very bad PMS. So birth control helps out in that. Birth control helps in pain. It helps in regulating your cycles. As you said, it helps in acne, skin control.
Yeah.
Okay, it helps in a lot of things. But for some people, it just doesn't work. Okay, for them, it's like they get more bloated, they get more irritated, because ultimately it is a hormone. Okay, but it does not cause the side effects that people generally claim. Like a lot of people have come to me and say they get acidity, they get nausea and stuff like that. But honestly, birth control is not responsible for most of it. It can cause a headache. If you have migraine issues, then definitely you should avoid having birth control, because that can aggravate your migraine. So that is one thing. But apart from that, it has a lot of protective factors also. Like, honestly, I'm very pro birth control. So I have seen it actually work wonders for a lot of people who otherwise were, struggling for a very long time.
For sure. We have friends who take it not for the birth control aspect of it, but more from a regulatory perspective, just because it helps their menstrual and mental health to just be in a stable space. So that's why I just want to understand, like, we have this idea that birth control is, that's going to mess up your system and stuff like that. But
no, personally, I am a very pro birth control person, because once you stop the birth control, your fertility returns within one cycle.
That's what I was going to ask. Does it have any long-term effects on your fertility?
Not at all. Not at all. It's all a myth. Because of taking the birth control, now I don't get my periods. I've heard I've heard people say this very often. What they don't realize is that because they were taking the birth control, the cycles were regular, which inherently they were irregular. And some people have like very, very messed up cycles, very messed up cycles. So at least the birth control was helping them with that. Now, if they want to conceive post that, there are a lot of medicines to help them do that also. And in fact, what birth control does is it basically resets your hormones. It stops your hormones from going haywire. Okay. But as I said, it doesn't always suit everybody. There are people who will have side effects. There are people who you cannot use it in. It's contraindicated in a lot of people. Like people with liver diseases, people with heart diseases, people who've had severe migraine. You cannot give it to such people. So for such people, it's any which way is not allowed.
But if you're on the birth,
if you're on the birth control.
No, I was asking a very stupid question. Can you still have you have unprotected sex and ejaculate inside?
If you're on birth control.
If you're talking about purely pregnancy point of view, then yes, you can. But if you're talking about, I'm going to have multiple sexual partners and not get an infection, then doesn't work that.
Purely pregnancy point of view.
Purely pregnancy point of view, if you take your birth control pill, the way it's supposed to be taken without missing a pill, which is kind of impossible.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah, you do miss a pill a month.
But, are you on birth control pills?
Yeah, I am.
Cool.
Because I'm saying I am very pro. Yeah. I am very pro birth control pills. So if you're in a monogamous relationship and you're absolutely fine with it, then you can definitely go ahead. But then what the problem is missing a pill. So once you miss a pill and you miss the pill at the wrong time, there is a chance you may ovulate and you may get pregnant. And you will not even realize. But that kind of a failure rate is there with practically every type of contraceptive.
I was about to say,
in the market.
There's not a single 100% one.
There is not a single contraceptive. In fact, the safest one and the most reliable one is the birth control pill. It has, if you take it, if you finish all your 21-day pills, your conception rate is less than 0.1%.
Wow. Claps for that, guys. I'm getting on the pill tomorrow.
But no. But if you do not take it well, the rates of conception can go as high up to 9%.
Just shut up, Sakina.
Yes. So this is what you have to be very, very compliant. If you're the type of person who will be like, and on top of that, again, it's a hormonal pill. If you miss the pill, there's a chance you may get a spotting or bleeding in between your cycle. So it's all hormones. Now, another thing about the birth control pill is that it helps protect against ovarian cancer. It helps protect against endometrial cancer.
Well, I didn't know this.
Yes, it does.
New info, yeah.
It helps protect against cancers. And overall, if you go to see when a lady is older, hormone replacement therapy is what is offered to us sometimes, which has protective action against a lot of other degenerative disorders in the body also, like osteoporosis, heart diseases, liver disorders. So yeah, birth control pill overall, I am very pro, but again, it all depends upon your body. Listen to your body.
Person to person, it differs, I'm
Listen
sure.
to your body.
You just talked about older women and like, again, this thing of balancing hormones, right? So we had a question that was in this age range thing, which is like early motherhood versus late motherhood. Now, I think an advanced pregnancy has, or what they call a geriatric pregnancy or whatever, that age has been with the advent of modern medicine and just things getting better and more,
modern science. You're able to push the boundaries of.
So that age has been kept. They kept pushing it now. So just for our understanding, what would you consider a relatively quote unquote normal pregnancy age, and something that's like now you're in an age where you need to be a bit more concerned or cautious?
I would say I have seen. I would say around 35, you can say as the cutoff. Okay.
It's like the still thing is, fine.
Yeah, it's fine. After 35, the issue that arises is that you are getting old as a human being. Whether you're male, female, doesn't matter. As a human being, you are approaching an age where your overall health is not going to be as great as it was when you were 20 something. You're going to start having health issues. You're going to start having certain amount of problems. And as a female, you start approaching towards menopause when you approach your 40s. So overall, your ovarian health is not going to be good. Your endometrial health is not going to be good. And beyond, when you reach like the age of 37, 38, that is when your egg quality also starts deteriorating. So the chances of you having a supremely healthy pregnancy also start reducing because you are aging. You're not going to be as fit as you were when you were like 20, 22. But then obviously having a kid at 20, 22 is just like...
dumb.
You are kids.
What do you feel about freezing eggs? Because this is a me question.
Eggs.
This is me. I'm asking you because I want to do this.
Your decision. Absolutely your choice.
Is it a good idea if you don't think like you're going to have children soon?
It's absolutely a good idea. Why not? If you can afford it, if you can freeze your eggs, you will have healthy eggs, good quality eggs, which are lasting for you till an age where you decide you're physically ready to have a pregnancy. But one thing you have to understand is freezing eggs, your egg quality will be good. But if you're saying, okay, fine, I'm freezing my eggs and I'm deciding to have a baby when I'm 38 or 39, you have to check your body's health also. Will your body be able to handle that pregnancy at that age or not?
I need to just...
Yeah. So basically, if you're any which way is planning to conceive when you're like 30, before you're 36, 37 years old, it shouldn't be a problem.
But what if natural you want to have two? So then you use the egg for the second one, the frozen egg. I mean, this was the idea that I had, was that you freeze a bunch, not for the first one, but for the second one.
So this is a very new concept that's coming up. This is more like a Western thing where ladies want to conceive like beyond their 40s and stuff like that.
No, I'm not talking about beyond the 40s. If it's beyond the 40s, I'm not having it because I'm not going to run after the kid at that age.
Exactly. That is also one thing. Forget running after the kid. Whether your body can handle a pregnancy or no at that age, that is also a big problem. So it's not like we've not seen it. We've seen 40 to 43-year-olds conceiving normally and delivering absolutely uneventfully.
Amazing.
And you've seen 21, 22-year-olds landing up in like severe complications.
Yeah, you can't predict.
You can't predict it. But then, as we said, like once you start approaching 40s, you start getting health issues. Like you can even be diabetic by that age. You can have high blood pressure by that age. And if you're saying you're a working woman, that stress, which applies to males, applies to you also. So your chance of getting cholesterol, diabetes, blood pressure, everything increases by the time you're like 38, 39, 40. So if you want to conceive at that age, not only will it be difficult for you to conceive, even if you do conceive, your body will have a lot of strain. So it's not only that you are going to get affected, the baby which is inside you is also going to get affected because of your health issues.
I'm having heart palpitations right now.
Oh my God. I didn't mean to
enough about conception and babies. I want to quickly talk about UTIs and STIs. What are some
next
common STIs that we need to be tested for, look out for?
Hey, that's another thing that, testing here is not such a big thing for STIs. But again, when I used to live outside of India, that was a very normal thing to make sure that you were tested regularly, just to, to give comfort to your partner, but also for yourself. And that's something that we don't really do here because, again, we don't talk about sexual activity, multiple partners, being in a consensual sexual relationship.
What is sex?
The conversation doesn't
Nobody
exist.
has sex. Nobody has sex in India. The babies just drop in the air. Oh, I have a baby.
So what do you recommend, right? Like from the time that you are sexually active, you should start.
I would recommend getting, see, there are a lot of tests you can do. You can get a high vaginal swab done, which will actually test for whatever microorganisms are there. So that basically checks for whether your normal bacteria are also present, because vagina has normal bacteria, which maintain the vaginal health.
Right.
So you need to maintain that balance. It also checks for whether or not you're getting infected by anything else. See, gonorrhea and syphilis and stuff like that in India, not very predominant. Like I have honestly, it is there. I'm not saying it's absolutely not there. The most common one in India is yeast infection.
Yes. But
Because-
wait, yeast infection has something to do with sex?
No, not really. It's not sexually transmitted. It's mostly because of hygiene issues and the humidity that we have in our country. That's one of the main reasons why you end up having yeast infections.
I definitely remember them touching on yeast infections even when we had this period shot, because it was like in the summer, you need to be a little bit more mindful. You need to check your underpants for what's coming out and all, because it's so hot.
And this yeast infection is something, once it starts coming, it just pours out. And it's not something which will go up. That's one of the advantages of having a yeast infection, is it doesn't climb up.
Nice.
It's within the vagina,
Nice.
but it's very gross. So you need to get yourself treated for it, because it can recur. It's something which is very stubborn. It does not go away.
But there's an easy fix for it, right? Just to let everyone know, like if you can go get medication and it's manageable.
It's fixable, but you can never predict how, whether it will recur or not. So that recurrence thing, it depends on the person's body, the person's immunity.
What a headache.
So, yeah, what a headache. So that is one thing.
Just for all the guys that listen to our show as well, getting tested themselves for STIs and UTIs and all of that stuff, that is something that they should be doing as well. And that is something in India that you can walk into any clinic or hospital and get it done. What should we be asking for? Like, suppose I walked into the clinic and I was like, I would like to just get the whole panel done. What is it that I'm asking for?
So basically, when you're doing syphilis testing, you can test for your blood. If you're doing a testing for gonorrhea, as I said, there's a swab that you take. Okay. And you do a pap smear also. Pap smear will also tell you whether there is some kind of inflammation or not. There's something called liquid-based cytology, which is done now, which is for HPV testing.
Right.
Human papilloma virus. Yeah. So that is what people are getting vaccinated against now for cervical cancer. So that virus is what is responsible for your cervical cancer. That is why getting tested for that is also another important thing. And that is sexually transmitted.
HPV, right?
Yeah. HPV is sexually transmitted. So these are the things you generally go for when you look for an STI. These are the most common ones.
So even guys should get tested for HPV, right?
Of course they should get tested for HPV. Yeah, because it's sexually transmitted. So if one person has it, the other person is going to have it. It goes hand in hand.
I want to talk a little bit about breasts and self-examinations.
Okay.
Some indication that you need to get checked, some soreness, age, whatever. What are these? Like, I don't see many women our age or younger girls also like being too bothered about our bobs. So what's the deal there?
Okay, so doing a breast self-examination is something which I think everyone recommends now. Because when you palpate, because normally you're not going to like deep feel the tissue of your breast on a regular basis. Even when you're taking a bath, it's not going to be like deep palpation that you're going to find any lump or anything. So you have to actively do it, and you have to do it voluntarily. Like you have to be aware of what you want to find. So the first thing you're supposed to look for is basically divide your breast into 4 parts. Okay. 4 quadrants. And check each quadrant separately. So first you're checking the upper outer quadrant, then you're checking the upper inner quadrant, then lower inner quadrant and lower outer quadrant. So 4 quadrants you have to check. Okay. And you have to check it properly by actually pressing and trying to palpate the tissue inside and feel if there's anything firm, anything hard, or anything that you feel it's moving around. Like generally, if you have kind of a breast lump, it will come under your fingers. So you'll be able to feel it's different from the rest of the tissue. And when you palpate in all 4 quadrants, you'll be able to realize this is normal and this is not normal. This is what I'm supposed to feel, and I'm not feeling the same thing over here. The next thing to do is palpate under the nipple. So you have to pinch your nipple and you have to try to go below your nipple and see if there's any lump over there. At the same time, when you're doing that, you'll be able to see if there's any discharge coming from your nipple. So these are a few things you have to keep in mind when you're doing a palpation of the breast, because most people don't do it. They don't even realize. So when they come to us, so when they come to us and we ask them, are you having any discharge from your breast or anything? They will say no. But as soon as we go to palpate and we just give the little squeeze, we realize, no, they're having some sort of discharge. So all these things are supposed to get checked out.
That's nuts.
Who is telling any of us this?
Yeah, really, where the sex education is so abysmal in this country. It doesn't exist.
And after watching Sex Ed on Netflix, I was like, just imagine if we had a show like that while we grew up.
When we were teenagers.
I feel like we'd been so much more prepared for all the nonsense that you'll end up going through. Yeah. Okay, there are some questions about like the day after and morning after pills.
Okay.
Look, it's an emergency. You go for it. But there's this, I don't know whether this is a myth or it's not, but there's this idea that you have that you can only take it thrice in your life. Is that a thing?
No, it's not about thrice in your life.
Good.
You can't do that. That's just
it
absurd.
Seems very arbitrary. I wanted to know that.
But the thing is, with emergency contraceptive is, you should not use it as your primary form of contraceptive.
Of course.
You cannot be like, okay, every time I have sex, I'm going to use this. Every time I have sex, I'm going to use it. Because it's a very high dose progesterone. So it ultimately will mess up your cycle. So if you're taking it early in the cycle, you might bleed earlier. If you're taking it later in the cycle, you might bleed later. So you get irregular menses because of that. And on top of that, you get a lot of breakthrough bleeding. And it is not 100% effective. If you end up taking it a little later and your ovulation and implantation is already done, it's obviously not going to work for you.
Fertilized already.
Yes, it's already fertilized. So it doesn't really, it's not like 100% foolproof thing that, okay, fine, if you take the morning after pill, you're 100% safe. So ghadi, if you take it throughout your cycle, you're like, oh, I had sex, I'm going to take the morning after pill. I had sex, it doesn't work that way. You have to use any alternative form. It is called an emergency pill.
Of course.
Bilkul, Dr. Saab, aapne sahi baat boli.
No, but emergency. Matlab, okay, fine, I screwed up. Now I need to do something. So that's when you take it.
My favorite, like that micro interaction that you have is like at the pharmacy when anyone is going to get anything in the sexual domain. Like I'm not
whether condoms or contraception,
whatever it is.
I mean,
the shame that the counter person feels on your behalf. It's like, you're not part of this. It's not like a you and me thing.
Like, bhaiya, aap tension mat lo. It's all good.
But no, nowadays I'm seeing that shame lesser and lesser, to be honest.
I agree though.
It has become like when I was younger and okay, fine. If you ask for something like a sanitary napkin, for example, they used to be like, okay, aapko paper mein wrap karke do kya?
Now it's much better. Now I think when you go to chemist,
now they don't care.
When you go to a pharmacist and stuff, now when you walk up and you put it on the counter, he's also like, yeah, okay. I mean, like move on with your life but I also think that's a lot of ownership on the customer as well. Like if you are
how confident you are,
nervous about it, it's going to be that. If you are confident about it, I remember I was at Noble Dash, the one that's over here. And I had gone.
Okay, I don't know where over yours.
I don't know. There are many Noble chemists. There's one near Ayushi's house. It's fine.
Yeah, I just meant it was a one near my house, and it was like a Wednesday. It was like a Wednesday night or something, and I ran out of bed, so I went in to get a box. And this young girl, she must have been in her early 20s for sure. And it was a Wednesday night, and I'm such an auntie. I'm like, it's a school night. That's what I was thinking. And she has walked in, and she has gone up to the counter and she's bought a packet of condoms. And she's pointed out which ones she wants and which. And so the guy's looking at her, obviously like looking up, and I'm like, you clearly look quite young. But what? And she just stood at him and steadfast looked at me saying, nahin, uske baaju mein wo wala chahiye. And I was there like, God.
Because it all depends upon your confidence also. If you are a little awkward in going and buying these things, then definitely it is going to be.
He tried to wrap it and give it to her. She was like, no, I'm fine. She scanned her little Paytm thing. She grabbed the box and she walked out. And I was like,
that's my girl. Sounds
like
me.
That's my girl.
Yeah. The first time I went to buy, I was also a little like, you try to overcompensate your fear and the other person's awkwardness by being overconfident, or just that's how I was at least.
It's like fake it till you make it.
Yeah, like Durex though. Sorry, no,
you don't have to shout.
We don't have to give any product placements here, but you can sponsor us, Durex.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would have loved to have Durex as the sponsor of this episode. But no, so this is good. Like I just feel like, okay, how do you recommend young people find more information about, like, because I think, like, yeah, you go on the internet, you Google, like, is this normal?
Yeah.
Fine. By and large, that gets you to the answer that you need. But like this idea that you can only take the eye pill like thrice in your life,
It's a
or
myth,
that
yeah.
there are so many myths.
I honestly
that-
don't know where people come up with this stuff.
So it is important to actually reach out to your doctor, your primary care physician, or your gynecologist, not only just in case something's happening, but also in case you have questions. So what is, for say males, what would be a gynecologist?
What is a gynac for males called?
So is a urologist or
A urologist.
okay.
A urologist.
But that only has not only wait, urologist also deals with a woman's UTIs and all.
It's
no?
basically to deal with the entire urinary tract. But for males, what happens is that the urinary tract and the sexual function is one, and it's like a same pathway. So for them, it
Right.
becomes like, okay.
So guys need to go to the urologist. Got
Yes, men, listen up. Please go to your urologist.
Yeah.
And
It's
get
also
it all
Or
important.
checked.
you even have andrologists.
Anji,
have-
of course.
Yes, you do have. I know of a male gynecologist who's specialized in andrology. So who specifically sees male dysfunctions, like male sexual dysfunction, male disorders.
Right. So that is
And
not
stuff
the
like
same
that.
as a sexologist, guys. What
That's-
are all these names?
That's not the same as a sexologist. An andrologist is actually someone who looks at the male aspect of
Right.
sexual health.
Okay.
So male genitalia.
Like how we
basically.
have females as gynecologists, they have
Yeah.
an andrologist. But
Okay.
there are very few of them in Bombay.
अच्छा
So you
चलो
would-
बच्चे लोग सुन रहे हो, if you're interested, there's a lucrative career option.
So
Lucrative
basically, you
career
would say
option.
though, like, defer to your urologist or look for
Yeah.
a good urologist if to get all your tests and stuff
Yeah.
done for your
Yeah.
sexual wealth. I mean, wealth,
Yeah.
health.
Health and wealth.
Yeah, at least see, as a gynecologist, if we find out that, okay, fine, if some female is having male partner issues, we refer them to a urologist.
Right.
Right. There you go.
Okay.
Well, this has been a very informative session.
Yeah, like a lot
to
of
know.
info has come up, but I want to just again now take a break from this info and speak to the adult Dr. Sakina herself.
Okay.
First of all,
The-
thank you so much for all the top tips.
You're
Yeah,
very
I know you must be getting
It was fun.
fried. All your
It was
friends and
fun.
family must be calling, every time some chota problem they have.
Exactly. But, honestly, I don't mind.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't mind.
But
I
Tasha
will
was
never
saying-
bother you. But I was just going to ask you, now you've been working crazy hours, like last night also, for
Yeah.
example, you worked all night and you came home today at noon, you were telling us. How often do you work such crazy hours? How do you manage your work, life, family? And listener, Sakina got married this year, recently.
This year.
This
Oh,
year.
congratulations.
Thank you. yeah,
So-
but my husband's not here. Like, we have a long distance marriage for now.
What? Where's
Yeah,
he?
because as I said, I have to finish my bond here.
Oh shit. So where is
Yeah.
he? In the foreign?
He's based in Dubai and I am here in Bombay. So I'll be moving there soon.
As soon as you're done with your bond, you'll go.
I
Okay.
have another few months left. I think another 3-4 months.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how do you balance all this stuff? Like
Yeah,
your work and
work.
adulthood, social life, mental health? How does this work?
Skincare routine, everything.
Yeah, it's a little difficult for me right now. Very honestly speaking, that it's not just about laziness. It's just like, about after a point, you're so exhausted. You're just like, bhai, I don't care about this shit. I just want to sleep.
Yeah.
So like when you're back home, the first thing you say is, okay, give me food and I want to sleep. So that's it. That's the only thing that goes on in your head at one point. But then honestly, I do try towards the evenings when I'm a little more fresher. I do try to do things for myself. And skincare routine is something which I don't miss ever. Yeah. So it's
Well
like
done.
my nighttime routine will be there irrespective of however tired I am, whatever it is. Because that is something which, I feel it's required for myself. It makes me
For
happy.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to social life, you guys are forgetting all my friends are doctors. We don't have a social life.
Oh my
There you
God.
go.
This is my dad, and my whole life I've been like, you don't have a social life. But now, as a 28-year-old doctor has told me this, how can I begrudge my old Well, not
We
old.
do try.
Yeah.
We do try. We do go out. We do make it a point. But at the same time, it's just like it was easier when we were in residency and we all
Yeah.
were living together
Mm.
because we were in a hostel, right? So we all used to live together. So for us, it used to be, well, okay, fine. 11-12 baje sabka kaam khatam hota hai in the
Yeah.
night. And then we all leave and we go out somewhere. But now if I'm at home, coordinating with someone who lives somewhere else, who gets off work at 11 o'clock in the night,
Not
it's
possible.
it's not possible. Plus with COVID,
Yeah.
it's
of
just not
course.
possible even more.
Has COVID taken? Were you really slammed by COVID in terms of just the work, the balance, managing
Yes.
the way, like the whole PPE aspect, all of that?
So yeah, when it came to COVID, actually during the first wave, I was preparing for my exams at that point of time. So the first wave did not hit me as badly as it hit other doctors
Mm.
because I was at home. But when the second wave came, which was, as you guys know, worse than the first wave,
Yeah.
it was chaos. It was completely chaos. Like there were people who we know who were dying on stretchers right outside the hospital because there were no beds. Beds were zero.
Yeah.
There was no capacity, and we had to wear the PPE kit. And because I was working in JJ is technically a non-COVID hospital. So what we used to do was that whoever used to come to us, the first thing we used to do is we used to do a COVID test for them. But the problem of getting that was that the COVID result used to come after like a couple of hours. And because of so many patients, the backlog was a lot. So we used to realize in the morning after doing everything for the patient, oh shit, this person was positive. So then we used to transfer the patient. So we'd already been exposed. So basically, we never used to remove our PPE kits.
Nuts.
Never.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, okay, fine, you're in a COVID ward, you're in a COVID designated area.
No,
so you wear your
this is-
PPE kit, you go inside for 6 hours and then you come out.
A mixed
Ours
bag.
is like ours is like a perpetual thing. You're constantly seeing patients and you're constantly interacting with them, not knowing whether they're positive or not. And the worst part was at that point that people were so reluctant to believe that they were COVID positive. They used to be like, ye ho hi nahi sakta hai. I am not going anywhere. I am going to stay here only. Mujhe kahan bhej rahe ho? And we used to transfer to Kama Hospital.
Huh.
Like all our pregnant patients or delivered patients, if they tested positive the next day, we used to transfer them to Kama Hospital, which is a COVID center. So they used to refuse. They're like, वहां पे जाते हैं तो लोग मर के ही वापस आते हैं, कोई जिंदा वापस आता ही नहीं है. And they're like, मेरे
भारी.
बच्चे का क्या होगा, मेरे husband का क्या होगा, मेरे इसका
Of
क्या होगा.
course.
And then
Full stress.
everyone used to get so stressed. And then we used to have patients used to abscond. COVID positive patients used to run away from the ward. And you're just like, oh shit, she's positive and she's running all over the place. It was madness.
This is not a joke, but I cannot help myself from laughing.
It was madness. Imagine we could not help ourselves from laughing. We were just like, what the hell is going on?
Unbelievable.
Just wild,
Yes.
wild.
Wild. It was really wild. So that was the wave which actually hit everyone really bad. And we used to get like such kind of patients, such crazy patients who refused to believe that ये कोड वर्ड कुछ होता नहीं है, मुझे कुछ हुआ नहीं है, तुम डॉक्टर्स ने पॉजिटिव करके लाए हो. There were some
Wow,
patients who
blaming
got
you.
communal. Some patients got communal. And they were like, no, this Hindu person gave this Muslim person this Muslim person transferred it to this person. And we were just like, stop.
Jeez, that's nuts. That's
Oh
nuts.
God, it used to be crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And we as doctors, you should just like look at them and be like, okay, I don't know whether to laugh, cry, or whether to bang my head on a wall.
The multitude of emotions you feel as an adult, and more
Yeah.
so when you're a medical professional, Sakina. It's tremendous the work you do and the work you have done in the last so many years to arrive at this place when your actual journey is about to begin as the professional in the field, as you take it forward. But I do want to ask you one last question. With the kind of life you have, the kind of work you have, and of course, mental health can be sometimes tough to navigate as an adult doing so many things. Have you considered or have you ever sought therapy or spoken to a professional? How do you deal with that mental health aspect of your life and job?
Honestly, I've been one of those privileged people who has really good family support when it comes
I was
to
about to ask that.
Amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. So my husband's super supportive. My family is super supportive. My in-laws are super supportive.
Lovely.
Yeah. So I have never really, honestly speaking, I've never been in that kind of a situation because I've been privileged enough to feel that. to have that, to have somebody to talk it out with, even without anyone judging me or without anyone saying, oh no, this is a part and parcel of your life. You have to deal with that kind of thing. Like I've always had someone who's heard me out. So touch wood. So in that sense, no, I never really have. But then yes, I would definitely recommend if somebody needs an outlet, please go to a therapist. Please. It is, and even if you don't, even if you just feel like you just need someone out there to talk to, find someone. Even if it's a therapist, there's no shame in that.
Of course.
There's absolutely no shame in that. Because there are a lot of people who feel very isolated. There are people who come from out of town, who are living alone in Bombay. Doctors, in fact, also who are away from their families. They're staying in such environment. I have been fortunate enough that, I have always had my home just a few minutes away from where I work.
Yeah.
If I want, I am home in like 15, 20 minutes. My mother is here. She's waiting for me. My husband has been supportive through the entire process. He's never pressured me to, do anything that I'm not uncomfortable with. But the thing is that not everybody has that kind of support. And Bombay can be an overwhelming place for people
who are lonely, actually.
Yeah. Yes, very lonely. For people who are new to this kind of environment.
Absolutely.
So yes, for these people, definitely, if it's, if you can find someone to talk through, that would be like really good for your mental health.
Words of wisdom from
medical professionals.
Yes. Okay. Yes. From Dr. Sakina to all other young doctors or like
young
people everywhere.
Young people, yes. And all your medical residents, the medical students, whoever is involved in this entire messed up field, really, really messed up field, but also very satisfying at the end of it. You really need to look after your mental health.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I think that sounds like the best first tip to have.
That actually, I was just going to ask you was, what are your top tips for adulting? Because we usually like to ask our guests who are functional adults, what do you use as a tip? But I think the first one is like your mental health is a priority. Yeah. It should be something that you check in with yourself. Cannot say that enough. Is there anything else that you would like to
Dr. Sakina's top tips? Any more?
The best thing that I would go for, what actually has worked for me, is confidence.
Oh, so, I love it.
If you're confident, if you are confident, whenever you step into a room, act like you own it. And even if you're not sure, even if you're afraid of something, if you act it, it will automatically come to you. Just wing it. Life will sort out itself. Life always sorts itself out. It's never been like it keeps on messing you up. And even if it is messing you up initially, it will find a way to solve itself later on. What you feel is probably the end of the world at this point of time in your life. 10 years down the line, it won't even matter to you.
Absolutely.
It just will not.
Yeah.
I love that confidence. So. That's definitely something that I know that I've told people. I've used it myself like so many times.
Always a good reminder.
Walk in just being like,
be confident.
I
got this. Yeah.
I got this.
Absolutely. I got this. Exactly. Yeah. Anything happens, any bad thing also that happens, like any work-related thing or personal-related issue, deep breaths and say, I got this.
Oh, Sakina, thank you. That is got to be one of the most lovely tips to end this episode with. Deep breaths and you got this.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You were...
thank you guys for having me.
You were our little medical guru through our journey. And I hope, like, I know for a fact that this episode is going to help a number of people just understand themselves a little bit better and to know what to do next. That's all that we can hope for. Thank you so much for your service in general. What you do is gloriously honorable work and we appreciate it.
Is there anywhere our listeners can find you on social media or no?
No. She doesn't want people to call her for medical tippany.
No, I'm still working on my social media handle as soon as I get
problem.
That.
No stress. Chill out.
I will send it to you guys.
Stay under the radar. It's best.
You're living a rich real life, so that's great.
Yeah, because for now, because if the schedule and so hectic, it just becomes crazy handling your own inpatient people. Then you're just like, okay, outpatient ko kaise handle karenge abhi?
For sure.
So it's just like, I'm just going one step at a time. I've just started out as my own. I'm trying to do my own thing. I'm still getting there because I'll be moving countries. So I'll still figure out my shit there.
Yeah.
So it's all about, right now I just want to take it slow.
Yeah.
So I've still not started anything on social media for now. I'm planning to. So as and when I do, I will definitely pass on that.
Definitely. Well,
Absolutely.
for everyone else, you know where you can find Tash and I. Tash she's on Instagram at RYTASH. You can find me on Instagram at AyushiA9 or on Twitter at JustAyushi. But mainly, you can find the both of us at aglastationadulthood@gmail.com. Please write to us. Ask us your questions. Share what you're going through. It doesn't matter, long, short, meme, song, whatever it is.
We're building a community. It's a safe space. It's a place where we can all learn, grow, evolve together.
And I just want more pen pals.
Yes, that's Ayushi's main selfish reason. But thank you for listening as always. Thank you, Sakina, for your time. And thank you, listeners, for listening.
We hope this was great.
Okay, thank
Peace
you
out.
so much, guys, for having me. It was very lovely chatting with you guys.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं, हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार।
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring you a very hardcore chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.